Thank you so much. Tim, thank you for that great introduction. What a great speech. David, it's great seeing you. I liked all the dancing while I was back there watching you all. You got pretty good moves. It is a joy to be here. Restoration of the American dream should be the organizing principle of politics in 2016. That's what this should be about. We should be focused like a laser beam on assuring that our children and grandchildren have more opportunities than what we had. Today in America, for the first time in recorded history, people do not believe their children will have more opportunities than what they have. And if you look at the statistics, you can see why. Workforce participation rates are lower today than they were in 1977. 6.5 million people are working part-time. They don't want to work part-time, they want to work full-time. They be able to put money in their pockets to dream whatever dream they want to dream rather than become dependent upon government. Small businesses are not growing. In fact, there are more businesses closing today for the first time ever in American history. More businesses are closing than are being formed. People think we're perpetually on the wrong track. The question of the American dream is a serious one, and the fact that Americans for Prosperity are working each and every day in every state to defend the American dream is something that is really important, and I appreciate all the hard work you do. It is really important that we do it, and it's important that we do it in Washington, D.C. as well. Look, all of this can be reversed. In my mind, we're on the verge of the greatest time to be alive in this world. But it's going to require a totally different approach in Washington, D.C. An approach that shifts power back to our communities, back to our families, back to the states, rather than the command and control progressive left agenda of trying to sort everything out from up above. It will require leadership, not just talking about it. Talking is fine. It's good to have a hearty debate. But we now need leadership to be able to fix these things. And you know what? I've had some practical experience, on-the-job training, if you will, when I was governor of the state of Florida. I said, as a guiding principle, that income would grow in Florida's families more than in government. Every budget that I submitted, all of which were balanced, did just that. And the net result was, by cutting taxes, $19 billion, 8 years in a row we cut taxes. By reducing the state government workforce by 11%, by challenging the things that were holding us back, like a career civil service system that was lifetime employment, rather than rewarding people for a job well done, we moved to a system where you paid people when they did their job right, but you fired them when they didn't. That system yielded a better result. Talking is great, but doing matters a lot more. I started when I was governor with $1 billion of reserves, for which I was kind of grateful. When we ended, we had $9 billion of reserves. And Florida was one of 2 states that went from AA to AAA bond rating. And you know what? Because we were frugal. We didn't say that every problem had to be solved with government. They called me Vito Corleone because I vetoed 2,500 separate line items in the budget. We created a process, and I was an equal opportunity vetoer. If a Republican, a powerful person in the legislature, had to put a project in that didn't go through the process, it got vetoed just like a Democrat project did. And the net result was we had discipline. We reserved for a rainy day. Compare that to the sorry state of affairs in Washington, D.C., where this great country's credit rating has gone to AA from AAA. It is shameful that we've not challenged the budget process in Washington. I know how to do that because I did it in Florida. The objective was income growth. And in Florida during my 8 years, income grew by 4.4% per year. Imagine if we could do that again in Washington, in the United States. I guarantee you the American dream would be vibrant and alive. People would be lifted out of poverty. And the great middle that defines this country would start getting a pay raise for the first time in 15 years. We should aspire to high sustained economic growth, where government's income grows at a far slower rate than people's income. That's the objective, and that's what we did in Florida. You know what? It's not just talking about principles that matter, limited government, personal responsibility, individual freedom. All those things are the bedrock principles of a strong conservative message. But we also have to have a zeal for reform, because there are a lot of things that are broken. And as governor, I had a chance to reform really antiquated old systems like our education system. As was mentioned, I created the first statewide voucher program. What wasn't mentioned, by the way, I created the second statewide voucher program. And I created the third statewide voucher program. And we have more people going to high-performing charter schools, 3 times as many than when we started. We put accountability in our system. We grade schools A, B, C, D, and F. We ended social promotion in 3rd grade. And the net result was that we had the greatest learning gains of any state. We were 50th out of 50 in graduation rate, and it's improved by 50%. And you know who are the winners of this? Not the Republican families, not the Democratic families. Everybody had a chance. African American kids had the greatest gains of any in the United States. Hispanic kids are 2 grade levels ahead of their counterparts. Kids with learning disabilities now have the greatest gains on the nation's report card test. We are going to win as conservatives if we solve problems by reforming things for everybody. Everybody could be a conservative if we make our case and we fix things for them so that they can rise up. That should be our message and our mission. The final thing I'd say about leadership is you should demand competency. It's not all about ideology, although I think limited government always is much more efficient than large government. But our government today is just sheerly incompetent. It just doesn't work. Every day, a day goes by with another scandalous behavior. How about the cost overrun in a veterans hospital in Denver? Started out at a $300 million deal, went to $800 million, and now it's a $1.7 billion hospital. Or how about the Office of Personnel Management? You've seen this, haven't you? 21 million records now probably in the hands of the Chinese. The Inspector General said that our cybersecurity was weak at OPM. Nothing happened. In fact, they had already gotten into that server, and 21 million files are now in the hands of the Chinese. When you add that with the Snowden affair and the Manning affair, our enemies know more about us than we know ourselves. That is irresponsible and sheer incompetence. And I believe it's important to have leaders that actually roll up their sleeves and solve problems. How would you like to have been governor of a state that had 8 hurricanes and 4 tropical storms, $100 billion of insured losses and billions of dollars of uninsured losses over 17 months? For me, it was the greatest joy of service that I could ever imagine. 1.2 million homes that were destroyed and unoccupied. That's when we show what kind of leaders we are. And we worked in Florida in a way that I'm so proud of. Local and state people, volunteers, fixing things, having a heart for people when they truly needed it. We need that kind of leadership in Washington, D.C. to become much more confident and compassionate for people when they truly need it. Before we can grow our economy at a high rate, which should be the principal objective, and that and keeping us safe, we need to make sure that the culture of Washington changes as well. I believe we should have a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. And I hope states in your work will continue to work to get the 7 extra states that they can have.
Very good. Very good.
I believe we should seek a line item veto power from the president again, so Vito Corleone goes to Washington, D.C. I will change the most convoluted, confusing budgeting process. It's like the Soviet Union. 10-year plans, 10-year costs. Rather than dealing with the here and now, they always slough off the cuts for the out years, but the raising of revenue seems to always come immediately. We need to create family budget kind of policies as it relates to Washington so that everybody knows what the structural deficit is. We should have term limits for all elected officials in this country. In Florida, we had term limits. In 1994, it passed. My belief is the Florida legislature has significantly higher quality by allowing young, dynamic people with diverse backgrounds to serve, and they do it with passion and conviction. That's what we need in Washington, D.C. as well. Elected officials in Washington, once they finish their service, they should probably go back home. They serve, they should probably go back home. We should have a ban on lobbying for elected officials so that they go back home and continue to make a contribution in their own communities.
That's for sure.
finally, in most state legislatures, and certainly in most jobs, if you don't show up to work, you don't get paid. We ought to have that as one of the guiding principles to change the culture in Washington, D.C. as well. And if we change the culture, then we can focus on how do we create high sustained economic growth. This September, next couple of weeks, I'm going to unveil a tax proposal that lowers rates and eliminates as many deductions as possible, ending crony capitalism and focusing on creating the easiest, clearest way for people to understand how the tax code works so that they can invest in their own dreams. I believe we need to embrace the energy revolution in this country, one of the great success stories of all time. This president has done everything he can to suppress it. We should approve the XL pipeline. We should allow exports of oil. We should expedite permitting for liquefied natural gas. We should create low-cost energy sources as far as the eye can see. It's the best deal that consumers will have with lower gas prices and lower utility prices, and it gives us the possibility, the great possibility of reindustrializing this country so that we're an economic powerhouse for the next generation of time. And we need regulatory reform at the state level, which you all fight for which I am grateful, but we also need it desperately in Washington, D.C. We used to be the most dynamic country in the world, and I believe the animal spirits are still amongst us. People want to start businesses, but they've given up. In my town meetings, I hear this over and over and over again. The confusion and the cost makes it harder for the next generation of job creators to be able to even start. And so regulation has to be one of the things that we work on. First and foremost, repealing Obamacare and replacing it with a market-driven system is what we need to do. We need to get rid of the political hacks and the academics that drive the Obama agenda through the regulatory process and put people in that have subject matter expertise. We need to support the REINS Act, a really good idea that Congress is pursuing right now, where if a regulation costs more than $100 million, it has to go back to Congress for an up or down vote, so that we constantly focus on the economic interests of every regulation. If I'm elected president, I will undo by executive order within the Constitution what the president has done by executive order. This president has used his executive authority way beyond his constitutional limits, but in the places where I believe the Constitution allows me to do it, we'll undo these things because that is more than appropriate. We'll shorten the rulemaking process. Do you honestly think that we could build the interstate highway system today in America? No. Or launch a man on the moon? Or get a permit to widen it, to raise a bridge so that the Panamax vessels can get into the ports of the East Coast? We have stifled our ability to be competitive in the world, and fixing how these rules work will be my first priority as governor. And the one thing president, and one thing I know, if we shift power back to the states using the 10th Amendment as a solid guide, a lot of this stuff will be done a lot more efficiently than it's being done today. The final point I'd like to make is high sustained economic growth where people are lifted out of poverty by reforming the things that are broken and having a belief in free market economics and limited government will create a renewal for this country like you could never imagine. We will be the leader of the world, but there's one thing that will hold us back. If as Americans we don't lead the world. This country is not a warmongering country. Our history is replete of examples of where when we lead, we create peace and security. This president and his former Secretary of State believe we're part of the community of nations, believe that we can lead from behind. They use grandiose language, but they don't act on it. And the world is a lot more uncertain today because our friends don't know where we stand and our enemies don't fear us anymore. We need to rebuild the military. We need to rebuild. We need to show respect for our veterans. We need to rebuild our counterintelligence capabilities and our intelligence capabilities. And there should be no gap with the alliances that have kept us safe, starting with Israel, but across the world. This country needs to be a friend of our You don't send troops in harm's way just at the drop of a hat. But you tell people, we've got your back. You tell people that we're going to do this together. You tell people that we're in it for the long haul. You don't send signals of pulling back. The world is a lot more dangerous today than it was the day that Barack Obama got elected president. In fact, this is the part of the speech where it's kind of a quiz, if you don't mind. Name a country in the world where our relationship is better than the day that Barack Obama got elected president, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State.
No country.
Cuba.
Oh, Iran.
Name the relationships that have been torn asunder. Canada, our largest trading partner. Most of Europe, certainly Asia, looking for a partner to be able to deal with an aggressive China. Eastern Europe, worried about an aggressive Russia. Across the Middle East, our traditional partners no longer believe we have their back. The world has been turned upside down because of the lack of American leadership, and I promise you, if I'm elected President of the United States, I will restore the traditional role of the United States as a leader for peace and security.
Very good. Very good. Obama's evil.
The final thing I'd like to say is that I do believe we're on the verge of the greatest time to be alive. If we just look up, I know people are deeply pessimistic and angry about how things are going, but they're cures for disease that we could never imagine just a short time ago. We have technologies that if we embrace them and people have the capacity to use them, they have the capacity to achieve earned success, it will give lives a purpose and meaning to all of us. If we fix these things, we're going to be in a time of great abundance, great prosperity. This is your mission. This is the mission that you've been working on each and every day in all of your states. I appreciate what you do. And I hope that you'll continue to reach out to people that are disaffected, that don't believe the system works for them anymore. Conservatives will win when we campaign everywhere, when we campaign with heart, when we campaign in the African American churches and the Latino communities across the spectrum of life. We need to make sure that we start with the premise that people will embrace our philosophy, that they are conservative. They just don't know it yet. That's how we have to act. That's how we have to campaign.
Yeah.
That's how we have to organize it. If we do it, we'll restore the American dream and we'll create a country where our children and grandchildren will have more opportunities than what we had. That is worth fighting for, and that is why I admire what you all do each and every day. God bless you all, and thank you.